If Your Honor please, the prosecution has one more witness to introduce, Mr. John Graham Whitfield.
John Graham Whitfield. Solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So, God.
I do.
What is your name?
John Graham Whitfield.
What is your occupation?
I am president of the Whitfield National Bank.
Were you related to the late Bjorn Faulkner?
I was his father-in-law.
It is obvious, Mr. Whitfield, that you are well qualified to pass judgment on financial matters. Can you tell us about the state of Mr. Faulkner's business the time preceding his death?
I shall say, it was desperate, but not hopeless. My bank made a loan of $25 million to Mr. Faulkner in an effort to save his enterprises. Needless to say, that money is lost.
What prompted you to make that loan, Mr. Whitfield?
He was the husband of my only daughter. Her happiness has always been paramount to me. But my motives were not entirely personal. Realizing the countless tragedies of small investors that the crash would bring, I considered it my duty to make every possible effort to prevent it.
Is it possible that you would have risked such a considerable sum in Mr. Faulkner's enterprises if you believed them hopelessly destined to crash?
Certainly not. It was a difficult undertaking, but I had full confidence that my business acumen would have prevented the crash at Faulkner's Liz.
He, therefore, had no reason to commit suicide as far as his business affairs were concerned.
He had every reason for remaining alive.
Now, Mr. Whitfield, can you tell us whether Mr. Faulkner was happy in his family life and his relationship with your daughter?
Mr. Flint, I would like to state that I have always regarded the family and the home as the most important institutions in our lives. You, therefore, will believe me when I tell you how important my daughter's family happiness was to me, and she had found perfect happiness with Bjorn Faulkner.
Mr. Whitfield, what was your opinion of Mr. Faulkner?
It is only fair to admit that he had many qualities of which I did not approve. We were as different as two human beings could be. I believed in one's duty above all. He believed in nothing but his own pleasure.
From your knowledge of him, Mr. Whitfield, would you say you consider it possible that Mr. Faulkner committed suicide?
I consider it absolutely impossible.
Thank you, Mr. Whitfield. That is all.
Mr. Whitfield, were you very fond of your son-in-law?
Yes.
And you never disagreed with him? Never lost your temper in a quarrel?
Mr. Stevens, I never lose my temper.
If my memory serves me correctly, there was some kind of trouble at the time you made that stupendous loan to him. Wasn't there something said to the effect that you denied making it?
Purely a misunderstanding, I assure you. I must admit that Mr. Faulkner made a somewhat unethical attempt to hasten the loan, which is quite unnecessary, since I granted it gladly for my daughter's sake.
You said that your fortune has been badly damaged by the Faulkner crash?
Yes.
And your financial situation is rather strained at present?
Yes.
Then how could you afford to offer a $100,000 reward for the arrest and conviction of a Guts Reagan?
Objection! What has that got to do with the case?
Your Honor, I would like to have the privilege of explaining this.
Very well.
I did offer such a reward. I was prompted by a feeling of civic duty. The gentleman, commonly known as Guts Reagan, is a notorious criminal. I offered that reward to make for evidence that would make his arrest and conviction possible. However, I agree with Mr. Flint that this has nothing to do with the present case.
Mr. Whitfield, can you tell us why you left for California in such a hurry before the beginning of this trial?
I think the answer is obvious. My daughter was crushed by a sudden tragedy. I hastened to take her away to save her health, perhaps her life.
You love your daughter profoundly.
Yes,
You have always made it a point that her every wish should be granted.
I can proudly say yes.
When she or you desire anything, you don't stop at the price, do you?
We don't have to.
Then would you refuse to buy her the man she wanted?
Your Honor,
Mr. Stevens!
You wouldn't stop if it took your entire fortune to break the first unbreakable man you'd ever met?
Your Honor, we object!
Sustained.
Now, Mr. Whitfield, are you going to tell us that your money had nothing to do with Mr. Faulkner dismissing Miss Andre? That no ultimatum was delivered delivered to him?
You are quite mistaken in your insinuations. My daughter was no more jealous of Miss Andre than she would be of Mr. Faulkner's soiled underwear. All men have, at some time or another.
I'd be careful of statements such as these, Mr. Whitfield. Remember that your daughter paid for what Karen Andre got free.
Your Honor, we...
Father, Father!
You got started muted! Do you know who I am? Do you know your country like a conqueror like that any of
That
that?
is just what I wanted to prove. That is all, Mr. Whitfield.
Your Honor, we move that the defense counsel's outrageous remark which led to this incident be stricken out.
The remark may go out.
The people rest.
Move that the case be dismissed for lack of evidence.
Denied.
Exception. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we cannot pass judgment on Karen Andre without passing it on Bjorn Faulkner. He had put himself beyond all present standards. Whether it was below or above them is a question for each of us to personally decide. But I'll ask you to remember that he was the man who said he needed no justification for his actions. He was the justification. The man who said that laws were made for the fun of breaking them. If you'll remember that, then you'll understand that the life into which he was thrown in his last few months was as impossible to him as that of a tiger in a vegetarian cafeteria. And to escape it, he would be driven to the most desperate of means, including suicide. Our first witness will be Jamie Chandler.
Jamie Chandler. Solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God. I do.
Your name
Jamie Chandler,
and your occupation.
handwriting expert of the New York Police Department.
Do you recognize this letter?
Yes, it is the letter found in Mr. Faulkner's penthouse on the night of his death. I have been called upon to examine it.
And what were you asked to determine?
I was asked to determine if the letter was written by Mr. Faulkner.
And your verdict?
This letter was written by Bjorn Faulkner.
Your witness.
Mrs. Chandler, it had been called to your attention during the inquest that Miss Andre was in the habit of signing Faulkner's names to one unimportant document at the time she was employed by him. Have you compared those signatures with Faulkner's real ones?
I have.
What is your opinion of them?
I can compliment Miss Andre on her art. The difference is very slight.
With Miss Andre's knowledge of Mr. Faulkner, is it possible that she could have forged a letter so perfectly as to avoid detection?
It is not probable, but it is possible.
That is all.
Sigrid Ljungqvist.
Sigrid Ljungqvist. Solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God. I do.
What is your name?
Sigrid Ljungqvist.
And what is your occupation?
My last job was secretary to Bjorn Faulkner.
How long have you held that position?
Since beginning of November, since Miss Andre died.
And what was your position before then?
Bookkeeper for Faulkner.
And how long had you held that job?
8 years.
Did Mr. Faulkner give you Miss Andre's position when she was dismissed?
Yes.
Did Miss Andre fill you in on your new duties?
Yes, she did.
What was her behavior at that time? Did she seem to be angry, sorry, or resentful?
No, she was very calm, like always, and explained everything clearly.
Did you notice any trouble between her and Mr. Faulkner at that time?
Lord, there can be no more trouble between Faulkner and Miss Andre than between you and your face in the mirror.
Have you ever witnessed any business conferences between Mr. Whitfield and Mr. Faulkner?
I've never been present at conferences, but I've seen Whitfield come to the office many times. Whitfield, do not like Faulkner.
And what makes you think that?
I heard what he said one day. Faulkner was desperate for money, and Whitfield asked him, sarcastic-like, what he was to do if his business crashed. Faulkner had shrugged and said lightly, "Oh, commit suicide." Whitfield looked at him, very strangely and coldly, and said, very slowly,
incident which I consider as a hoax and whose purpose I would like to determine. A man has just called on the telephone and insisted on speaking with me immediately. But when informed that it was impossible, he gave the following message just brought to me. Do not put Karen Andre on the stand until I get there. No signature.
I want to go on the stand right away.
May I ask why, Miss Andre?
Answer me now, Stevens.
I'm afraid it's impossible, Miss Andre. We have to finish the examination of Miss Junquist.
Then hurry. Hurry. I shall ask the defendant to refrain from further interruptions.
Now, Miss Junquist, where were you on the night of January 16th?
I was in our office in the Faulkner building. I was working. I'd been working late for many nights.
And what did you do when you heard of Mr. Faulkner's death?
I went to call Air Whitfield. I telephoned his home in Long Island, but Butler said he'd not home. I called his office in town, but no answer, no one there. I called many places, but not to find Air Whitfield. Then I had to call his home again and tell Mrs. Faulkner that Air Faulkner committed suicide.
And when you told her that, what were Mrs. Faulkner's first words?
She said, for God's sake, don't give it to the newspapers.
That is all.
Just one moment, please, Miss Andre. Why such a hurry? Whom are you expecting? Miss Junquist, you've been employed by Mr. Faulkner for 8 years, haven't you?
Yes,
Did you know all this time how crooked and criminal your boss's operations were?
no, I did not.
Do you know now that he was a criminal and a swindler?
No, I do not know that.
You don't, eh? And you didn't know what all those brilliant financial operations of his were?
I knew that Air Faulkner did what other people were not allowed to do, but I never wondered and I never doubt. I know it was not wrong.
How did you know that?
Because he was Air Bjorn Faulkner,
And he could do no wrong?
air lawyer. When little people, like you and me, meet a man like Bjorn Faulkner, we take our hats off and we bow. Sometimes we take orders, but we don't ask questions.
Splendid, my dear Miss Junquist. Your admiration for your master is worthy of admiration. You would do anything for him, wouldn't you?
Yes,
Are you very devoted to Miss Andre, too?
Miss Andre was dear to Air Faulkner.
Then such a little matter as a few lies for your master's sake would mean nothing to you.
We object, Your Honor.
Objection sustained.
I not lied, Air lawyer. Air Faulkner is dead and cannot tell me to lie. But if I had a choice, I'd lie for Bjorn Faulkner rather than tell truth for you.
For which statement I am more than grateful than you can guess, Miss Junquist. That is all.
Karen Andre.
You solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help you God.
That's useless. I'm an atheist.
The witness has to affirm regardless.
I affirm.
What is your name?
Karen Andre,
And what was your last position?
secretary to Bjorn Faulkner.
How long had you held that position?
10 years.
Tell us about your first meeting with Bjorn Faulkner.
I answered his advertisement for a stenographer. I saw him for the first time in his office on an obscure side street of Stockholm. He was alone. It was my first job. It was his first office.
And how did Faulkner greet you?
He got up and didn't say a word, just stood and looked at me. His mouth was insulting even when silent. You couldn't stand his gaze very long. I didn't know whether I wanted to kneel or slap his face. I didn't do either. I told him what I had come for.
And did he hire you then?
He said I was too young and he didn't like me. But he threw a stenographer's pad at me and told me to get down to work, for he was in a hurry. So I did.
And you worked all day?
All day. He dictated as fast, almost faster than he could talk. He didn't give me time to say a word. He didn't smile once, and he never took his eyes off me.
When did he first?
When did he first take me? That first day I met him.
And how did that happen?
He seemed to take a delight in giving me orders. He acted as if he were cracking a whip over an animal he wanted to break. And I was afraid,
Because you didn't like that?
because I liked it. So when I finished my 8 hours, I told him I was quitting. looked at me and didn't answer. Then he asked me suddenly if I had ever slept with a man. I said no, I hadn't. He said he'd give me 1,000 kroner if I would go into the inner office and take my skirt off. I said I wouldn't. He said if I didn't, he'd take me. I said try it. He did. After a while, I picked up my clothes, ready to go. I stayed. I kept the job.
And you worked and lived and rose to success together ever since?
For 10 years. When we made our first million kroner, he took me to Vienna. We sat in a restaurant where the orchestra could sing gypsy. When we made 10 million, he took me to Delhi. We stood on the shore of the Ganges, on the steps of an old temple where men had been sacrificed to gods. When we made 25 million, he took me to New York. We hired a pilot to fly a plane above the city, and the wind waved Bjorn's hair as a banner over the world at his feet.
Can you tell us the extent of Mr. Faulkner's personal fortune at the height of his success?
No, and he couldn't tell you himself. He had no personal fortune. He took what he wanted. When he owed money to one of his companies, it was crossed off the books and debited to the accounts of several other concerns. It was very simple. We prepared all the balance sheets ourselves.
Why did a man of Mr. Faulkner's genius resort to such methods?
He wanted to build a gigantic net, and to build it fast. A net over the world held in his own hand. He had to draw unlimited sums of money. He had to establish his credit. So he paid dividends out of his capital, dividends much higher than we actually earned.
When did Mr. Faulkner's business difficulties start?
Over a year ago.
And what brought him to America this time?
A short-term loan of $10 million from the Whitfield National Bank was due, and we could not meet it. We had to have an extension. Whitfield refused it, until his daughter came into the question.
And how did that happen?
Bjorn met her at a party. She made it obvious that she was greatly interested in him. Then, one day, he came to me and said, Karen, we have only one piece of collateral left, and you're holding it. You'll have to let me borrow it for a while. I said, certainly. What is it? He said it was himself. I asked, Nancy Whitfield, and he nodded. I didn't answer at once. It wasn't very easy to say. Then I said, all right, Bjorn. He asked, will that change things between us? I said no.
Had Mr. Faulkner proposed to Miss Whitfield?
No, she had proposed to him.
And how did that happen?
He told me about it. She took him for a drive and stopped on a lonely road. She said that they were lost, that she had kidnapped him, and she wouldn't release him. He answered that the ransom she wanted was not in circulation. Then she turned to a point blank and said, what's the use of pretending? I want you and you know it. You don't want me, and I know that. But I pay for what I want, and I have the price. He asked, and what is the price? She said, the extension of a certain $10 million loan which you'll need to save your business. If you stay out of jail as a swindler, it can be only in the custody of Mrs. Bjorn Faulkner.
It's a lie! It's a shameless lie! How could you? Quiet, please. Anyone disturbing the proceedings will be asked to leave the courtroom.
What was Mr. Faulkner's answer to that, Miss Andre?
He said, it will cost you an awful lot of money. She answered, money has never meant anything to me. Then he said, will you always remember that it's a business deal? You're not buying any feeling. You're not to expect any. She answered, I don't need any. You'll have your money and I'll have you. Such was the bargain.
And was Mr. Whitfield eager to accept this bargain?
Bjorn said he thought Mr. Whitfield would have a stroke when his daughter's decision was announced to him. But Miss Whitfield insisted. She always had her way. It was agreed that the loan would be extended, and Whitfield would give Bjorn unlimited credit.
So, in other words, Faulkner sold himself as his last security?
Yes, and like the others, it meant nothing to him.
Did you resent that marriage?
No, I didn't. We had always faced our business as a war. We both looked at this as our hardest campaign.
Why did Mr. Faulkner dismiss you 2 weeks after his wedding?
He was forced to do that. Whitfield refused to advance the money he had promised.
What reason did he offer for that refusal?
The reason that Bjorn was keeping a mistress. It was Miss Whitfield's ultimatum. I had to be dismissed.
And did Mr. Whitfield grant the loan after you were dismissed?
No, he refused it again. He attached what he called a slight condition to it.
And what was that condition?
He wanted the controlling interest in Bjorn's enterprises.
Did Faulkner agree to that?
Bjorn said that he'd rather gather all his stock certificates into one pile and strike a match.
And did Mr. Whitfield grant the loan?
No, he didn't grant it. Bjorn took it.
And how did he do that?
By forging Mr. Whitfield's signature on $25 million worth of securities.
And how do you know that?
I helped him to do it.
Did this help Mr. Faulkner?
Only temporarily. Certain dividend payments were coming due. We couldn't meet them. Bjorn had stretched his credit to the utmost, and there was no more to be had.
How did Mr. Faulkner take the situation?
He knew it was the end.
And what were his plans?
You don't find men like Bjorn Faulkner cringing before a bankruptcy commission, and you don't find them locked in jail.
And the alternative?
He was not afraid of the world. He had defied its every law. He was going to leave it when and how he pleased.
I told you to wait.
You're drinking!
Larry, keep quiet, please. Oh, please keep quiet. You promised to stay away.
Karen, you don't understand.
Your Honor, I demand that this man not be allowed to testify.
Why not, Miss Andre?
Wait! Don't say a word!
Your Honor,
Karen, stop. For God's sake, stop her.
Sullivan, Your Honor, this man loves me. He'll do anything to save me. He'll lie. Don't believe a word he says.
Your sacrifice is useless. Bjorn Faulkner is dead.
He's dead?
Yes.
Bjorn, dead?
Didn't you know it,